to the podcast of World Literature Today, your passport to great reading.
On today's episode, we'll feature interviews with writer and journalist Lana Abdel, writer Carlos Labbé, a reading of poet Arbër Selmani by Suzana Vuljevic, 3 book reviews, and for those of you who are trivia buffs, a quiz. My first guest is Lana Abdel. She's a Lebanese fiction writer, journalist, and critic based in Cairo. She holds a PhD in literary criticism and is the author of 8 novels and 3 short story collections. She also appears monthly on the Al Arabi TV channel's program Difaf, presenting a segment on world literature and significant cultural issues. Good morning, Lana, or good evening, since you're in Cairo.
Good evening, Sonja. Thank you for having me here.
You're originally from Lebanon, and now you live in Cairo. And I was wondering if you could talk to us about the literary cultures in Lebanon and Beirut and in Cairo, because I know Lebanon is also a multilingual country, and both have rich literary traditions.
Yes, I am Egyptian and Lebanese origin, and I have lived in Cairo for 24 years. So I feel emotionally connected to both literary cultures. Beirut, as you said, has always multilingual atmosphere. Arabic, French, English coexist naturally there. And this gives Lebanese literature a strong openness to the world and to experimentation also. Arabic is dominant because Lebanon is an Arabic country, but French literature is common in cultural society. And also with the new generation, English is well-known. Novels, new generation like to read novels in English now. American culture attracts new generation, as all the world.
So it sounds like they're reading a lot of English in English, not in translation of other languages, but American English novels then.
Yes. American English and British American novels and the British novels and translation novels, the novels from any other literature which translated to Arabic also. Cairo has a very vibrant cultural life. Literature in Cairo feels deeply connected to everyday people, not only intellectual elites. Mm-hmm. And let me clarify something important about the social differences between Lebanese and Egyptian society, because these differences are naturally reflected in literature and culture and women. What I want to say, in Lebanon, there is a very clear social and cultural impact from the civil war, which lasted for more than 15 years. It affects are deeply present in Lebanese fiction, in novels, in poetry, in short stories. It is very difficult to find a Lebanese novel that does not somehow refer to the war and its consequences on individuals, death, displacement, migration, fragmentation. In Egypt, however, the social reality is quite different. We are speaking about a society that has been more socially stable in comparison to Lebanon, and that did not experience a long civil war in the same way.
And how does that impact the literary culture and the readership?
Egyptians don't generally tend to leave the country. Egyptian people prefer to stay in Egypt.
Whereas there's a large Lebanese diaspora.
Exactly.
But we don't always hear so much of an Egyptian diaspora.
Exactly. Egyptian travel temporarily to Gulf area for work in order to overcome economic difficulties, just for that. But they return to Egypt.
Your doctorate is in autobiography in the Lebanese female novel. And I was wondering if this is a common trope or theme that you see throughout much of Lebanese literature.
It would not be accurate to say that a direct autobiography is especially common.
I see.
In the writing of Lebanese women authors, often becomes a way of exploring a deeper question related to identity, memory, war, exile, and the body.
Now, let's turn to your own work. You're a journalist as well as in the literary world. And I was curious about the relationship between newspapers and literature in Cairo and through the Middle East. Is it a very close one in general?
Historically, the relationship has been extremely close between newspaper and literature. From past until now, many major Arab novelists and poets worked as journalists. And the newspaper also played an important role in shaping literary culture. Literary supplements here in Cairo, in Dubai, in Gulf area general, introduced readers to new writers, criticism, and intellectual debates. In some cases also novels were first published and serialized from in newspapers. This happened in the past. Yeah, in the past, not now. Not now.
Because that's something we don't see anymore in the Anglophone world. You know, I think some of the great British authors started that way, or even in America, but it's something we almost never see here.
Yeah, I know. In the British, yes. But here now also not popular now. Maybe short stories more popular to publish in a newspaper, but even today, despite the rise of digital media, journalism still remains closely connected to literature in the Arab world.
So speaking of literature in the Arab world, you mentioned the Cairo International Book Fair in your essay. That sounds like a wonderful event. Please tell us a little bit more about this.
The Cairo International Book Fair not only is one of the biggest cultural events in the Arab world, it's like Carnival. What makes it special is not only its size, but the diversity of its visitors.
Is the diversity from within Egypt or through the whole Arab world or even the whole world in general?
The whole world in general. Because Cairo International Book Fair attracts students from all the world, attracts publisher, attracts Egyptian people, families, intellectual, and younger readers, all sharing the same space and interests. It feels less like a commercial event and more like a cultural celebration.
So outside of Cairo and Alexandria, which are the huge population centers, would you say that there's a large readership throughout the whole country of Egypt?
Yes, in the whole country, because now social media helped introduce books to younger audiences whom contact with the social media. Today, many younger people discover books through online recommendations, book clubs, and digital communities.
So it sounds like social media has had a very positive impact with increasing readership, because often here the concern is in the US that social media is taking people away from books, but it sounds like in Egypt it's really brought more people into reading.
I can say yes and no in the same time. The internet changed reading culture in both positive and negative ways. On one hand, digital media competes with books as like in all world. On the other hand, it created new reading communities and made literature more acceptable. Readers now discover books through Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and online discussions. And young writers can also reach audiences more easily than before. So I think the internet transformed the literary culture rather than destroying it.
I see. Because in your essay, you mentioned that reading's no longer confined to elite readerships. So it seems like the internet has had an influence and an impact in this.
Yeah, Because there is a growing interest in literature and reading and to discover novels, to discover psychological novels, feminist writing. Younger readers especially seem open to experimenting with different genres and literary voices.
That's very fascinating. So quite a wide range of styles are being read. That was one of the questions that I had about what the reader's preferences are, because in your essay, you discussed there is a strong desire for historical fiction. So
Yeah.
can you talk to me a little bit about this desire for historical fiction as well as the other genres that you'd already talked about?
Historical fiction and Sufism and um, psychological thrillers also attract new readers who might not have considered themselves a part of literary culture before.
Mm-hmm.
But today, many young people like to contact with the book clubs, to discuss, to discover, to listen to many or different ideas.
Could you talk about where you see the literary culture going, both in Egypt as well as throughout the Middle East?
This is a difficult question, difficult and sensitive question, because
Mm-hmm.
I think literary culture is becoming now more open, hybrid, and decentralized also, with younger generation and social media now. All this shaping literary life through digital platform, independent publishing, independent translation. We also see more blending between memoir, fiction, and personal testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And despite the technology changes, I believe people still need stories to understand themselves and the world.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about the culture of poetry in Cairo and in Egypt.
Even if poetry is one of the oldest and most powerful forms of artistic expressions, especially in Arabic language,
Mm-hmm.
but now we live in a novel is dominant uh, on scene.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so fascinating, and I think the Cairo International Book Fair sounds so fun to attend. I hope I get the chance to
Yeah,
someday, and I
I
hope many
wish.
of our listeners get to as well too, especially if they're in the region.
Thank you, Sonja.
Ready to test your knowledge of world literature? Here's a brief 3-question quiz. Number 1. Renowned poet and professor Conchitina Cruz is from which country? A. Colombia, B. Spain, or C. The Philippines? Number 2. The Azeri language is spoken by a large minority in which country? A. Iran, B. Syria, or C. Afghanistan? Number 3. The Ripped Bodice bookstore in Brooklyn, New York specializes in which genre of fiction? A. Romance, B. Horror, or C. Historical? Answers coming up later in the podcast. Next, we feature a poem by Arbër Selmani. Arbër Selmani is a journalist, poet, and writer from Pristina, Kosovo. He's published 5 books and in numerous journals. His latest book of prose, titled Testosterone, was released late last year. His poem Father in the Rain is read by his translator, Professor Suzana Vuljevic. She's a writer, historian, and translator of Albanian, as well as Bosnian, Croatian, Montenegrin, and Serbian. Her translations have been published in many journals worldwide. Her work has been recognized by Breadloaf, the American Literary Translators Association, and Traffica Europe. She currently teaches in the country's only Albanian studies program at DePaul University in Chicago.
This is Suzana Vuljevic reading Arbër Selmani's Father in the Rain. A man returns to earth from underground, bewildered, eyes open, in a downpour of the unexpected, without an umbrella, in an overcoat that makes the whole scene look more timeless. As he treads over pollen-kissed flowers, he looks up at the sky. The aroma of hibiscus leaf hangs in the air, and turning sullen, he regrets the mistakes, all that went unsaid, his cheeks moist with rain, and with no one around to squeeze them, because he can't see into my window. This is my father in the rain. His dampened wrinkles like a map. A sudden bolt of lightning shakes him from stillness. If he doesn't get out of the way, he'll be hit by an electrical pole. His face is aglow. The capillaries of his green eyes draw shut. The cold makes his legs quiver. A soaked bee laps water from his hair. He's hunched over under a tree. My weary father has escaped the graveyard. A bucket of life's toils weighs on him because life is a road flooded with torrents. This is my father in the rain. One of his poems, more precious than this one, tucked away in an inner coat pocket, presses against his chest, harder than the 2 worn-out stints. An anguished God mourns, and father remains silent, adrift. I hate the movies we planned but never managed to go see together. He has 3 surviving children, 2 others who've died, and a wife who's given up hope. He may think that they've forgotten him, except rain doesn't wash away the memories. I can't open this window or call out to him or tell him we've been waiting for him for a long time. This is my father in the rain. Can such a pain be endured? Has this become our fate, for our fathers to be stuck in limbo? The police, firefighters, emergency trucks, someone has to do something. I can't because this damn apartment has no bearing on the outside world. You all can bring him to me or take him back to his final resting place. A gust of wind pulls the cobblestone up with its roots. My father weeps for me, and I for him through a rainstorm of fury. This is my evanescent person in a downpour of loneliness.
Carlos Labbé has published 9 novels, 2 story collections, and an essay on Juan Aymar. 4 of his novels have been published in English by Open Letter, including the soccer novel The Murmuration. Among his recognitions are Granta's first Best of Young Spanish-Language Novelists list, the Pedro Sienna Award, and Literal Latin American Voices 2024. Welcome, Carlos.
Hi, Sonja. Thanks for having me.
So, in the latest issue of World Literature Today, you have an essay that draws on myth. It's a version of what we would refer to as the hare and the tortoise in the English-speaking world, but it's a little broader than what we know. But it's also related to the upcoming World Cup. So, can you talk a little bit about this use of metaphor? Because you've juxtaposed 2 things in a very interesting and unexpected manner.
Yeah, the hare and the tortoise, as you know, is a very old fable. It's been told many times, from Aesop to Ana Maria Schwa, the Argentinian writer, and many more. I think it's first time came in the old Panchatantra in India. And I used it to root football, soccer. I'm gonna say football, soccer. Which
because most of the world calls it football, but we call it soccer. Here in America, we're kind of the outlier.
Right. So let's call it football, soccer, and which I could be very vain or superficial because there's always news, something different, something new about transference or and the new result of the game. So I thought I need a balance to talk about football, soccer from a literary perspective.
So, and could you expand a little bit more on that? How does this metaphor of the hare and the tortoise, with a third character who's seeing everything from above, how does this relate to what goes on in soccer from your point of view? Because it's an interesting metaphor to use.
At the beginning, I was thinking about competition, and competition tends to be between two poles, right? The 2 rivals. And I said, okay, but here we have a World Cup, and it's going to be in North America with 3 hosts, Canada, United States, and Mexico. So there at the beginning, I had three poles, not 2. And I think it must be one of the first accounts in literature in humanity about competition, the hare and the turtle. I added a third character. First, I found a Cherokee version that is gives much more depth to the classical Greek version that we used to read in schools.
In your essay, you refer often to fear in the context of football, soccer, realistic fiction, and also in the context of the Pinochet regime in Chile.
World Cup this World Cup is 48 countries invited or classified.
Wow.
And so I said, like, wow, and I said, but what we all have in common right now, after COVID, during these war times, we are at war in many places. So, and I say, what are we running towards? What's the goal of running? The soccer is a game about running towards a goal. But what is the goal? And I said, maybe it's not about ambition, it's not about progress. That is a concept that is right now is very contended, progress. So maybe we are not running towards something, maybe because we are running from something.
And could you talk a little bit more about fear in the context of realistic fiction? Because I would have never thought of it that way. I always think of realistic fiction as something very, very safe almost, because we're writing about day-to-day realities, often, as an escape from our own. But you also do mention in your essay the context of the Pinochet regime in Chile. So could you talk a little bit about this?
Novel is a safe space for many, many people around the world. And I was wondering, while writing this essay, like why novel is a safe space at the same time that fear is all around. I mentioned Pinochet in the Pinochet years in 70s and 80s in Chile. It was really a boom of novels in Chile. Chile used to be a country of poets. Neruda, Mistral, De Roca, Parra, you got many. And suddenly, under Pinochet, Chile became a country of novelists.
So you really mark the Pinochet regime as a turning point then in terms of your literary culture.
Absolutely. You can say all the dictatorships in Latin America were the moment when Latin America became from a place of poetry or even folklore to a place for great novelists all around.
And what was it about the form of the novel that you think drew writers to it more than poetry, as you say, or fables or stories or essays?
Yeah, novels tend to be a place where characters can interact in a way where they feel surrounded by a border, by a limit that empowers them to be whatever they want. If you think about Don Quixote, one of the first novels in Western tradition, it's a moment when an old idealistic guy who's reading too much decides to embody fiction. So novels is you would say is the moment when you do the opposite of fear, imagining something that is safe. I talk about that in one part in the essay.
Yes.
That's why we love novels. That's why we love fiction, and that's why nowadays science fiction and fantasy is by far the genre that most people love.
Yes.
Because we are surrounded by so many crises and so many uncertainties that we say, okay, you have a fiction, even if it's a fiction full of conflicts and adventures, still you are in a safe space of fiction.
Yes, that's very well said. Very well said. And speaking of novels and novelists, you've written and researched on writers like Roberto Bolaño as well as Juan Carlos Onetti. Can you talk about their significance to the world of literature?
Yeah, Onetti is a Uruguayan master from the most important part of his work is in the 50s, and he's recognized as one of the pre-boom, pre-Garcia Marquez, pre-Vargas Llosa, Clarice Lispector moments. So basically, he was one of the many writers in Latin America who set the ambitious, let's say, basis for those great writers. Along Borges, Marta Brunet, in every place in Latin America, you will find a master like Onetti.
And that's interesting because I feel like in the United States, we have very little exposure to him. I think Bolaño's been getting more exposure recently. And could you talk a little bit about Bolaño?
Bolaño is a very interesting case. I consider him a friend. I was a student at the end of the 90s, and he was in Spain, like doing the best part of his work. Yes. And I did my research, my dissertation and final dissertation in college about him, and I sent him my dissertation, and he was very, very generous. Wow. And so we started like emailing, because on these days you email people. We got friends. I never met him in person, but we had a long correspondence.
That's very lucky, because sometimes people say don't meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed.
He was a great human being and a great writer. He was very playful and very important to give joy back to the big political Latin American novel. He was full of humor, but a lot of despair. He came from the 60s, and he was like, we were defeated. We lost the match against hope. Now, to have hope. So he had no hope.
Could you talk a little bit about one thread that seems to run through your body of work, which is the question of reality or truth and manipulating it, and how that relates to this question about creating hope and the question of fear?
Yeah, thanks for understanding that in my work. You have a point there. I'm very interested in the full circle of this conversation, in the concept of game. I think everybody who is in art, or in the creative, realm, let's say like that, is really playing something. It's really like in a game of narrative. My aim, writing, is present to the reader the wider possibilities of fictions. So basically, the reader can choose. That sense of choosing, I think, is very liberatory.
And one last question for you. You are not just a writer, but you are also a musician. And you've talked about giving people hope. And I'm curious about if you can talk about the influence of music on your writing and vice versa. How do they inform each other? Do you see music as something that brings hope to your own work or to listeners?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. It's because we have been thinking about many things in this interview, right? But music is, as you know, is very physical. It's not rational. It's not logic. To me, music in literature, in my novels or stories, even in my essays, I always try to infuse my prose with music. It's a way to bring it a little bit out of the what you call mind. Out of the abstract.
That's also a great universal theme. Speaking of universal themes, music and words, or music and literature, the eternal siblings. Thank you so much for this very fascinating conversation. And are we allowed to ask who you're rooting for in the World Cup?
Yes, I'm rooting for Ecuador, my South American heart, because Chile didn't classify. So I have to root for an Andean team. Let's cross finger and maybe see Ecuador in the finals.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Sonja.
One of the highlights of World Literature Today's magazine is many books in review. Today, I'll feature 3. Colleen Lutz Clemens of Kutztown University reviews Megha Majumdar's A Guardian and a Thief. Megha Majumdar deploys several narrators to tell the story of the collapse of Kolkata during a climate crisis. Over the course of a week, the narrative arcs of the 3 main characters collide while a punishing, deadly heat envelops India. Shortlisted for the 2025 National Book Award, A Guardian and a Thief illustrates how individuals suffer from a problem that humans created and then failed to remedy: global climate change. Well-positioned Indian citizens can flee to the United States with a climate refugee visa, though, as the novel unfolds, a disgust for these refugees grows. The reader is left wondering who is the titular guardian and who is the titular thief among the 3 main characters, for during the week, each of them plays both roles. In danger of dying from the heat, the characters suffer in other ways. The individuals' need to survive in the punishing structural violence of climate change and historical greed is the heart of their stories. Sebastian Andres Grandas of Brooklyn reviews Elvira Hernández's Bodies Found in Various Places, or Cuerpos Encontrados en Varias Partes, the selected poems of Elvira Hernández, translated by Daniel Borzutsky and Alex Schumacher. The poetry does not matter, writes Elvira Hernández. 20 years of our lives were lost. It was a rigged lottery. And yet, since being seized and tortured by the Chilean dictatorship in 1979, Hernández has never stopped writing. Her poetry has remained relentless, speaking with the melancholy, irony, prayer, and fury that have poured out of Chile for those 20 years of military rule and long after. Of the book's 2 co-translators, Borzutsky is Hernández's direct contemporary, a Chilean-American poet. Schumacher, for his part, was Hernández's first full-length English translator, facilitating her arrival on a hemispheric stage with his rendition of The Chilean Flag, published in 2019. Silence is a weapon, a way for the Chilean military to draw blood. Yet silence is also a way to live through the age of names without giving in to the belief that only what has, quote, concrete representation, unquote, deserves attention. Alice Catherine Carles of the University of Tennessee at Martin reviews Best Literary Translations 2026, edited by Arthur C. with No Anutai, Wendy Call, Ukyu Tekten, and Kola Tubosun. The number of foreign literary works published in translation in the United States is small, and European works still dominate 45% of the market. In 2023, a group of writers and translators, listed above as series co-editors, found a home with Deep Vellum, an independent press based in Texas. Best Literary Translations 2026 is the 3rd volume of the series. The final selection was made by guest editor and U.S. Poet Laureate Arthur C. from a first choice made by the series co-editors. It features 32 works in 21 languages, ranging from the widely spoken to the critically endangered. Rare languages such as Bicol, Guarani, and Latgalian are given a voice for the first time. Besides Michelle Johnson's notable translations pieces that have informed the readers of World Literature Today of outstanding book translations every year since 2012, Best Literary Translations is the only other such initiative nationwide. As promised, here are the answers to the quiz. Number 1, Conchitina Cruz is from the Philippines. Number 2, the Azeri language is spoken by a large minority in Iran. And number 3, the Ripped Bodice bookstore in Brooklyn, New York, specializes in romance novels. The World Literature Today podcast can be found on all your favorite platforms, where you can like and subscribe or follow us. It is produced by Sonja Srinivasan in cooperation with World Literature Today's editors Michelle Johnson, Daniel Simon, and Rob Balmar, with support from R.C. Davis Undiano, Executive Director. Recording assistance provided by Ryan N. Wilcox of Groundworks Media Lab and Adrian Diffie. Additional assistance by Kirsten Johnson and by the VoiceOver Alchemy Group. Special thanks to Hadil Khunaim, Christopher Kaiser, Steve Kemsley, Jed Kim, Catherine Olson-Carter, and Suzy Vuljevic. Original music by the Global Ensemble Agaw Dilim in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Based at the University of Oklahoma in Norman, the magazine is published 6 times a year in print and online. You can read and subscribe at worldlit.org, where you'll find new pieces added weekly. We hope you'll join us for the next episode. In the meantime, please visit worldlit.org and follow @WorldLitToday on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Facebook for the latest updates from the fascinating world of contemporary international literature.